Welcome to another episode of MFRW Bayside Chats, where we honor and highlight the accomplishments of Republican women in Maryland. Today we have a very special guest, former Congresswoman Connie Morella. She was also a state delegate and an appointee in the Bush administration. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very looking forward to the conversation.
It's my pleasure, thank you.
So you're originally from Massachusetts. Can you tell us what brought you to Maryland?
Oh yes, what brought me to Maryland was my marriage. I married a colleague from Boston University, and we came to Washington because he wanted to go to law school, and it was Georgetown Law School. So it was to be a temporary move to the Washington area.
And then once you got to Montgomery County, you were an educator. Can you tell us a little bit about being an educator before you got into politics and how you got into politics after that?
Exactly. Well, as a matter of fact, I worked for the airlines when I was at college, my last 2 years, and my husband was in the service. And then I worked for an airline that is no longer in existence. It was TWA, Trans World Airlines. And so therefore, when I got married and we moved to Washington, I then worked for Pan American Airlines. And then they're defunct too. So what does that say to you about my working for airlines? No longer in existence. And then we had a child, my firstborn, and we needed some money also, and he was at law school. And so I then got a job teaching. And I taught, my first year teaching was at Poolsville in Montgomery County. And what was interesting about that was that was the year that Poolsville integrated. The schools all integrated, but Poolsville was the only one that had difficulty. It was a rural community, and they liked people, but they just couldn't see blacks coming into their school system. So it was quite a revelation for me to witness that. The gal from Massachusetts who was going to watch what's happening. And so it was quite a learning experience. P.S. Poolsville is now one of the top schools in the state. And they have had some great students coming from there, so they have also evolved with the times too. So I taught there, and then I switched to a school in Montgomery County and taught in Montgomery County, and then I ultimately taught at Montgomery College. I went back and got my master's degree at American University, and I taught at Montgomery College, and I at that time became involved with something they called affirmative action, and I was appointed to a commission for women. This was happening throughout the country. There was the context of the fact that women needed to have a place at the table and be listened to. So I then became president of the Montgomery County Commission for Women, and that's when I did my research and lobbying and learning. I learned about the fact that women were not being given opportunities in jobs simply because of their sex, not their ability or anything like that. I remember testifying at the Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad because they wanted to move to a bigger location. They needed to get the credentials to do it. And I said, I appeared on behalf of the Commission for Women, and I said, well, if you don't have any women and you're not allowing women, I hardly think that the public and the county should support you moving into a new location. And so they changed, and even now, they've even had the head of the Bethesda Rescue Squad has been a woman. So the changes have been taking place, but that's what first got me interested, aware, and desirous of bringing a change to help our society by simply giving women an opportunity to participate and excel.
And bringing change is exactly what you did.
Yeah.
So after your time on the Montgomery County Commission for Women, you ran for delegate. Could you talk a little bit about the race and why you ran for delegate and the impact that you made in the state legislature?
I ran for delegate because I thought a better way of getting things to happen positively and with my experience is to actually be in elective office, because then you can reach more people and you can reach those people who are making the laws so they're aware of it. So it's very interesting. The first time I ran for House of Delegates was 1974, and that year may not mean anything to you, but it was the year that the president was then left out of office, and so then Ford took his place. Well, despite that, I remember knocking on doors and having people say, do you believe in the double standard? And I said, well, of course not, but that isn't what they meant. They meant politically. And so I lost that race. But the reason I think it's important to note is that I lost the race, and I think I lost it particularly because of what was happening, the impeachment, naturally. But I went back and ran again. And I like people, particularly young women, to know that if you don't succeed the first time, get back there. And I topped the ticket the next time. So that continued my political facet of my career. And I was still teaching at Montgomery College at the same time.
Yep, that's the glories of the People's Legislature. It's
Yeah,
not your only job. But later on, you ran for Congress, which, got that full-time job, and you won. But could you talk a little bit about the race and, overcoming a rather blue district?
That was pretty unique success. I must say, my best advisors had said, you got to be prepared to not win. It's good you're trying, but just know you may not win. Because I ran against a man, Stanley Kramer. I ran against a man who was in the state legislature, who was very wealthy, very well liked. In fact, he was in the Senate, and I was in the House. And Stuart Bainham was his name. And they said, you'll never win. And I did. I got the endorsement of the Washington Post. That probably helped to a degree. But nevertheless, I think it was getting out there, knocking on doors, getting to meet the people, getting to chat with them, to listen, to learn, to lead. I think that's my motto. Listen, learn, and lead, right? And so I won that, and that began my career on the federal level. And I served for 16 years. I enjoyed the 16 years. It was full-time. Raising a family, being involved in the community. As a matter of fact, I lived in this house the whole time.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. And then I was redistricted. It was interesting because I knew with the redistricting where they took the northern part of my district and put it into another district with Frederick, and then they took a lower part of my district and put in Prince George's County. So it was obvious that this was planned, and that's one of the problems with redistricting in our society. And so I knew in advance that I probably wouldn't win. But again, it's something I advise people if they're interested. Try again. Don't give up. Don't say, well, no, I am not going to win this one, so I won't run. So I thought, by God, I'm going to give it a chance. And I lost. And I then was appointed to the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris, no less. So I didn't have to knock on doors. I didn't have to worry about votes. Well, except I voted on behalf of our country. And it's interesting because there is a difference between elective office and appointive office. When you are appointed, I was appointed by the President of the United States, and I was not to look at what I think about something. I could voice my opinion to the people who are involved or responsible for formulating the concept, give them my advice, my counsel. But when it came to voting, it was what our United States government wanted, what the officials wanted. So you did not digress. So from being the member of Congress from Montgomery County, the most liberal county in the state. As a matter of fact, just as an aside, was one of the local newspapers had said that in their research that it was the most democratic district in the country held by a Republican at one point. And so therefore, my modus operandi was a little different. than it was when I was representing our country, where I knew what our formula was, I knew what our principles were and our responses. So what I did is I would fight within, in a nice way, I would fight with my colleagues at OECD to get them to understand where the United States was coming from. And I didn't mean to use that word fight, because quite frankly, in order to get to win, you have to use your diplomacy and you have to use your education. You gotta know your thing, and then you gotta know the people that you are going to be presenting it to, and there's you do that selling job. But it's all like a person to person thing, and I think that's what politics is all about. Politics, people, right? Mm-hmm.
You said there that you were representing the most Democratic, Republican-held district. So I think looking back at some of your votes in Congress, you definitely voted for what the people wanted. So could you just describe a little bit about navigating that and finding the difference between voting what your party wants versus what your constituents want?
Yeah, basically, I looked at both sides, and I obviously did what I thought was the right thing to do, and it was based on the information that I garnered and how it would help certain areas. But it was interesting. I remember one of the things I would do if I had a staff person who would say, "Oh, Congresswoman, I don't know how to answer this terrible letter I got from somebody who says some terrible things about the office and all." And so I would just simply say, just write a phone number on it and put it on my desk. And so maybe another one would come in another week or so, whatever. They didn't come often. But when it was so hard for a staffer to say, how do I answer this, I'd say, put the phone number on. So there were times when we'd be in Congress, and it would be in the evening, or early evening, a special order. Somebody was saying something on the floor. I'm in my office. Pick up the phone and I'd call him. And usually it was a male. And this is it, that's funny. Only a handful of times that I do it, but it's a great story. But usually I would pick up the phone and I would say, Mr. Smith, I hear this voice, yes. And I'd say, well, this is Connie Morella. And it puts a pause. And then I'd say, I'm calling you from my office, and I wanted you to know I read your letter. And then there was another pause and a gasp, and it's like, oh, I didn't think you would read it. Oh, I didn't think you would get it. So we would talk a little bit, not so much about that issue where there was a disagreement, not so much about the issue, but just in general what Congress was doing. And he said, I am so appreciative that you called me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so why do I tell you this story? Because it radiates, because I would find out much later that when he went to his Rotary meeting, he said to his friends, the Congresswoman personally called me. I am so impressed, and we chatted. And so I got benefits by virtue of being promoted by somebody who was so angry at something or other, at some vote I had cast or something that was coming up. So again, I guess my takeaway is being courteous and respectful of people, whether they disagree with you or not, pays off. It makes you feel good too, but it does. It pays off in different ways.
So you are the only female state legislature to have been elected to Congress for the state of Maryland. Do you have any thoughts as to why there aren't more women elected to Congress for Maryland?
I think it's sad. I think it's very sad. And here in the state right now, there are no women
in the delegation.
Not even anywhere in the delegation, let alone having had the background of working in the state legislature. I think there are a number of problems. I think, first of all, women have got to help support other women too. I think women have just got to get out there and show that they have the support of business, they have the support of various organizations, get out front and work in their primary. But I think they feel that, oh, this is daunting, because the guys get into the race and they talk about who's supporting them and that kind of thing. And I think women tend to get to fade, or to say, oh, this is too daunting, or I can't possibly win that, so I won't do it. So I think they have to show more guts. Okay, my adage, no guts, no glory. And, and I think that's what they've got to do. And they've got to then get out there and get more people to support them too. And even in a primary, there's a lot of like, well, I know it's pretty hot now, but door knocking, doing whatever ways you can to communicate with people can make a difference. And if they don't succeed, again, I think they should try again.
Right.
Keep going. The men have done that. I mean, how many men who have been presidents who lost elections along the way, but they didn't give up? Yeah.
So can you describe for us some of your most favorite or memorable moments serving in Congress?
Well, I think some of my most memorable moments probably were when my legislation got the votes necessary. And I was very honored to have been the sponsor of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. Again, it was a concept of constituents coming to me and saying, you know, we really think we should do it. And so I said, well, I don't know that you're going to have a chance if it's not government funded. And we put the legislation in. It took 5 years, and eventually it came to pass. It had to go through commissioning in the District of Columbia, and if you know now that wonderful spot it has, and then we got national assistance, and that was a time of really applauding how inch by inch something could come through to fulfillment. So that was a great opportunity, a great event. And there have been a number of other times when legislation has passed and we've come together. Some of them, like the Violence Against Women Act was one, getting women involved in research at the National Institutes of Health. And of course, I served on the committee that had like National Institute of Standards and Technology. I was very proud of them. So with all of these achievements, we would celebrate. We'd celebrate with members of Congress who agreed, and also with some of the beneficiaries, representative beneficiaries. So I think just plain getting to know your colleagues, then you can have some fun with them. I sometimes found that the way to get to know them, and I think now more than even when I was there, was when you were on a trip with them. Different parties, they got to know each other, and they got to know they had some similar interests, some similar background, some similar things that they liked or didn't like. But right now in Congress, that's one of the problems, is the fact that they are just so separated, so polarized, that I have found that there are some Democrats who don't even know some of the Republicans that they serve with, and vice versa too. So I think when you talk about good moments, the good moments are when people can respect each other and laugh about things, and things they share, and know they can be different, but they can get satisfaction out of what they're doing.
So in your time as a congresswoman, you got to meet a lot of really cool people, a lot of very important people. So could you tell us some of those people that you met?
It was a great opportunity to meet people that were in theater, that were in movies, that represented other countries officially. And what I found interesting, particularly when it came to movie stars like, Barbra Streisand, even Judy Garland, as a matter of fact, it goes back that far, and so many of the others that came in that were on TV as well as the movies, they liked meeting members of Congress. It was kind of like the members of Congress liked meeting them, and they liked meeting members of Congress. So it's so interesting when you think of the regard that different professions have for another profession. And it's so interesting that I found them to be human beings. I mean, and almost whether it's even Muhammad Ali, and baseball players too that came in. They were sort of like awestruck to be with members of Congress. And members of Congress are like, hey, this is great, will you sign this for me? So it shows again that people are people. And when you are in political office, you do have an opportunity to meet people that are considered celebrities because maybe they're interested in some legislation. And very often, many of the people that I did meet were interested in certain legislative facets, maybe topics, maybe sometimes specific legislation. And then sometimes they were just brought in by their PR people, come in and meet these people. So it was a pleasure. It was an opportunity to meet people that were also heads of state. I particularly enjoyed that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you said throughout the interview, you're encouraging us to try and try again and don't give up. That, you know, one failure doesn't mean that you've completely failed. But do you have other advice for women who want to be leaders within the Republican Party?
I think my advice would be get involved. Don't sit back and think someone is going to come to you and say, oh, will you consider running for this, or we want you to. You've got to be there. You've got to be there and try a number of diversified areas or groups. Meet people. Think about what it is that they are doing or that you enjoy doing. And these contacts are really going to come in handy in many ways. Sometimes even just for the information that will help you in what you're doing. And other times they're going to be big supporters for you and give you an opportunity to run for something. That's the only way you're going to know about whether there were even openings and whether you would enjoy the opening. And of course, as I've said before, you know, when you don't succeed the first time, you've learned something from it. You've never lost by trying. And then if you continue to prevail, you will either get it or you'll get something that will be even better or that you will enjoy very much. So I think what women need is confidence. And we're finding it sometimes in the wrong way. Yeah, I mean, like confidence, but know what you're doing. and very often that is the case too. That women really prepare more for things, whereas the guys very often know that they're going to be recognized, so they don't have to work that hard. I can remember early on in Congress, an example of being on a committee where I made a statement, and then following me, and thank you, Congresswoman, or thank you, Connie, and then somebody, a male member of the committee, would say the same thing I said, and it would be, oh, Congressman Smith, notice, not first name wasn't used, Congressman Smith, that's brilliant, we'll have to really consider that seriously. And so therefore, what I would say, Mr. Chairman, I'm so appreciative that he said the very same thing I did, and that you're responding that way, you know. So you have to be aware, and you have to speak up, and you can do it in a nice way. And people then think, yeah, you know, look at that difference. It was simply because she was a woman, they didn't take it seriously, you know. I'm not saying that often happens, but occasionally that concept, very well. So I think women need to get out there, have confidence in themselves and in what they're doing, and learn the facts, and continue to work to prevail. Yeah.
Well, thank you. This has been a lovely conversation, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And with that, this has been another episode of MFRW Bayside Chats, brought by the Maryland Federation of Republican Women.
Cheers to the Maryland Federation of Republican Women, and to you for coming out for this interview.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.